Currently attached as a research fellow at the Institute of Policy Studies of Sri Lanka, Dr. Asanka Wijesinghe's research interests stretch from macroeconomic policy all the way to food security. Holding a BSc in Agricultural Technology and Management from the University of Peradeniya, an MS in Agribusiness and Applied Economics from North Dakota State University, and a PhD in Agricultural, Environmental and Development Economics from the Ohio State University. Dr. Wijesinghe has undertaken efficiency analysis, particularly public spending efficiency, using parametric and non-parametric efficiency analysis approaches. We hereby welcome Dr. Asanka Wijesinghe to Economic Insight 22.
Well, we can see a lot of problems in the economy. We can safely say that we are facing the worst economic crisis since the independence in 1948. The manifestations of this crisis are, one thing is low growth. In 2021, quarter 3, the growth rate was negative, and it can be expected that in 2022 also our growth rate will be negative. And the economic conditions, the variables will reduce the growth rate in future. One reason for this is the unsustainable debt levels. Sri Lanka had two deficits, persistent budget deficit and trade deficit. We had to finance them by obtaining loans. Ultimately, our debt became, especially external obligations, became unsustainable. Sri Lanka has suspended debt payments right now, and negotiations are going on for debt restructuring. And there is a discussion with the IMF for a possible bailout. So we can say that country has declared it is not in a position to meet the external debt obligations. Another crisis right now is the low agricultural production. We see that although national level data is not available, we can expect about 30 to 50% yield loss in paddy. This was because of the fertilizer ban, fertilizer and agrochemical ban introduced about 1 year ago. So the production is really low. Another thing is the food inflation, and the overall inflation is very high. Year-on-year inflation in April 2022 was about 33%. Amid this crisis, the government, the monetary authorities have introduced tight monetary policies like increased policy rates. Sri Lanka is facing serious challenges like this, and there is a possibility that in future unemployment rate would go up. To summarize, Sri Lanka is in an economic contraction with heavy debt burden, and this debt burden will weigh down the future growth perspectives of the country. Well, these rating agencies function as kind of an information provider. Credit rating agencies reduce the information asymmetry between the borrowers and the creditors. For an example, if let's say I want to borrow some money from bank, the bank needs to know my credit worthiness, whether I will be able to repay that loan. Bank may use my credit score. In the US, individual person has a credit score, so they use that to approve even credit card. Like that, international rating agencies rate these sovereign countries. They consider a lot of factors like political risk, income and economic structure, growth prospects, fiscal flexibility, external liquidity, and external debt burden. In 2019, there was a crucial tax policy change in Sri Lanka. We introduced the tax cut. The government introduced a tax cut. The result was the government's fiscal position became weak. Then these rating agencies downgraded sovereign credit worthiness of Sri Lanka. Then what could be the impact of such thing for a borrowing country like Sri Lanka? There are two immediate implications. One thing is it will become extremely hard to access to the credit market, independent credit market, global capital markets. It happened to Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka was cut off from accessing to capital markets, so Sri Lanka could not issue bonds to refinance the debts. Other thing is cost of borrowing will go up. That's the interest rate a country has to pay when it obtain loans. I think both things happen to Sri Lanka due to these rating agencies downgrading. Yeah, that these are the key impacts. And another thing is investors also are careful about these ratings. They will decide whether to invest in a country or not based on these ratings. Yes, there are two things that can happen. One thing is, let's look at an example. Let's assume there is a simple economy. In that economy, there is just one good, and let's assume that one good is rice. That's the staple food of Sri Lanka. Assume that the price of rice kilogram is 200, and you, me, and all earn 2,000 rupees per month, and we spend that for rice. That means every month we individually purchase 10 kilogram of rice for 2,000 rupees at the cost of each 200 per kilogram. Now let's assume the government decided to print more money and give us more money. So every month now we are earning more than 2,000 rupees, but the agricultural production is not increased. The available rice quantity in the market is same. But I have more money. I may think, okay, let's eat more rice, and I go to the market with that money and demand more rice. But in the market, rice is in limited supply. The ultimate outcome can be price goes up to 250 or something like that, above 200, 250 or something like that. We call this as inflation. So money printing has a direct link with the inflation. Now someone can argue that, okay, when there is more demand, the real economy may respond by producing more. Yeah, then we call this as some kind of stimulant, stimulate the economy. But the problem is, in economics, we assume that resources are limited. let's assume as a farmer, I see there is more demand for my paddy, then I try to cultivate more. But for that, I need more labor. When I go to higher labor, now the people may think, okay, inflation is high, I need high wage, and my demand for more labor will shot up the wage rate. Finally, my profit rate will go down. So in the long run, though I see little stimulating impact of this money printing, the long run impact is not that positive. So these are the impact of printing money. It's like this with I think when the policymaker understood that there was going to be a crisis around 2021, especially due to the lack of foreign reserves, it introduced a lot of import controls. Why I consider this fertilizer ban is also something like that, because Sri Lanka spent about 300 million for fertilizer around 2019. So that was our fertilizer bill. I think the government wanted to save that, so it banned chemical fertilizer. So it directly affected the agricultural sector. It is one key industry that is affected by the economic crisis. There were experimental evidence that going to 100% organic could reduce the rice yield by about 30%. As I said, there is no national level data right now, but it is said that the yield loss of the last season was about 50%. It's a significant impact on this sector. Another sector, another industries which are affected is this domestic manufacturing industries, which use a lot of foreign value added components. That means as a country, we produce goods within the country, but we import raw materials for them. For example, textiles, these electronic equipments, if we produce them here, we have to import a lot of raw materials from abroad. So these sectors are currently facing some difficulties in obtaining raw materials. If you look at this data on the import controls, about 30% of the intermediate goods. Intermediate goods mean the products or goods that are used in the production process within the country. We import them, and about 30% are under import. So if you talk with these manufacturing firms, they would say that they are facing increasing difficulty in obtaining these raw materials. Well, it is a very difficult question to answer, but we all are looking at the possible measures we can take as a remedial measure to this economic crisis. In a nutshell, we can say that there is no painless way out. Sri Lanka will have to sacrifice a lot in consumption terms, mostly like the consumption-oriented lifestyle will not be here for some years, at least 1 or 2 years. In the long run, the way out is achieving debt sustainability. That means reducing the debt level, the debt stock of the country, and we need to build an economy targeting the export market, not domestic consumption oriented market. Instead of that, Sri Lanka should produce goods that can be exported. Then we can earn dollars, foreign exchange, we can build reserves, and we can meet the debt obligations. These are long run solutions for this economic crisis. In the short run, we are seeing the shortages like essential commodities and raw materials. They are in short supply. Sri Lanka should remove these shortages as soon as possible to make sure that economy functions well and economy grows from this point. But for that, Sri Lanka has to achieve debt sustainability and regain the ability to trade. It is obvious now there is no homegrown solution for this foreign exchange crisis. I think that was why government started to negotiate with the IMF. It is the direction. It is a good thing for the economy and the policy wise. And in the once such a deal is possible, Sri Lanka can gradually remove these import controls and remove these shortages, eliminate shortages, then allow the market to function well. Another important thing is in the long run, we need to keep the macroeconomic variables like inflation at the optimum level. Then the investors will regain the confidence about our economy and start to invest, because foreign direct investment is necessary to develop an export-oriented economy. There is this short-run food crisis. Actually, that's one immediate challenges for the policymaker to make sure Sri Lanka people have enough food to fulfill their dietary and nutritional needs. Sri Lanka should seriously think about using existing foreign exchange to import food whenever possible, like lentils, wheat, because urban poor and poor in general, they eat these food commodities. But I can understand now fuel bill is really high. It's about $500 million per month. Whether we like or not, Sri Lanka will have to cut down fuel or energy consumption to save foreign exchange and import food to alleviate this or to get rid of this food crisis, at least to mitigate the food crisis. Another option Sri Lanka has is relying on food donations. I think UN has called for food donations. They should be distributed among the most vulnerable communities, and Sri Lanka should make sure that those food donations would not flood our market and reduce the domestic food prices. It's bad for the food producers. About 25% of our labor force in agricultural sector. So I like to suggest that those food donations should be distributed among maybe school children through school meals program, and the most vulnerable people, also introducing mechanisms like work for food, like people are asked to work in maybe in agricultural sector, like clearing irrigation canals, like that, then give food donation. Those things are the possible measures Sri Lanka should take in long run and short run to get out of this crisis. Thank you.